There's a specific kind of cold that settles into your bones when you realize the child you gave your life for has become a stranger. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not an explosion. It's a slow, quiet freezing, like a winter creeping into a house with bad windows. You don't notice it until you're shivering in your own living room, wondering where the warmth went. My name is Arthur. I'm 68 years old. I spent 42 years as a heavy machinery mechanic, working on diesel engines that were louder than thunder and dirtier than sin. And this is the story of how my only son put a price tag on my dignity, and how the universe, or maybe just karma, stepped in to balance the scales. Let me take you back, because to understand the betrayal, you have to understand what was broken. My wife, Sarah, passed away from ovarian cancer when our son, Marcus, was just 7 years old. She fought it for 2 years. By the time we paid for the funeral, my savings were entirely wiped out. I was 34, a widower, left alone with a little boy who had his mother's green eyes and a heart full of grief. I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have family money. I had a toolbox, a pair of steel-toed boots, and a promise I made to Sarah on her deathbed that our boy would never go without. For the next 15 years, I didn't just work, I destroyed my body. I took every double shift, every weekend call, every holiday emergency. I remember showing up at Marcus's middle school play smelling of brake fluid because I didn't have time to shower between the shop and the school auditorium. I sat in the back row in my grease-stained work shirt, watching him play a tree in the background, clapping louder than anyone else in the room. I packed his lunches. I helped him with math homework. I barely understood myself. We got accepted into a prestigious business school in Chicago. The tuition gap was massive. So I did what any father would do. I quietly sold the only thing of value I owned, a restored 1969 Mustang I had spent a decade building, and I wrote the check. I told him it was from a special grant. I thought I was giving him the world. I didn't realize I was buying him a ticket to a world that didn't have room for me. College changed Marcus. No, that's not fair. The environment, he immersed himself in, changed him. He started hanging around kids whose parents owned summer homes and yachts. When he came back for Thanksgiving during his sophomore year, he didn't want to eat at our worn-down kitchen table. He complained about the neighborhood. He started correcting the way I pronounced certain words. Then he met Elena. Elena came from a family of real estate developers in Boston. She was beautiful, sharp, and carried herself with an air of effortless superiority. She didn't walk into rooms, she inspected them. I knew I was in trouble the very first time he brought her home to my small, 3-bedroom house. I had spent 2 days scrubbing the floors, polishing the cheap furniture, and cooking a roast. When they arrived, Elena stepped through the front door, looked at the scuff marks on the linoleum, and her nose wrinkled just a fraction of an inch. It was a micro-expression, but a father notices these things. "It's cozy," she said, pulling her designer coat a little tighter around her shoulders as if my house might infect her with poverty. Marcus didn't defend our home. He just laughed nervously and said, "It's just temporary. Dad refuses to modernize." Over the next 5 years, Marcus climbed the corporate ladder at a massive architectural and development firm. He married Elena in a lavish ceremony in Boston. I attended, of course. I rented a tuxedo that didn't fit right. I was seated at table 14, near the kitchen doors, sitting with Elena's second cousins and a few bewildered coworkers. Marcus didn't ask me to give a speech. He didn't introduce me to his new, wealthy in-laws. I was just a ghost in a rented suit, watching my son perform a life I couldn't afford to be part of. The distance between us grew from a crack into a canyon. I only saw them twice a year. When I visited their new, custom-built mansion in the suburbs, I was treated less like a father and more like an embarrassing charity case they were obligated to entertain. But I swallowed my pride. I kept my mouth shut, because Dorothy had always said, "Patience is the anchor of a family." Then came the second week of December. The week everything shattered. Marcus called me on a Tuesday. He sounded frantic, breathless. "Dad, the heating system in the new house is completely failing. The contractors can't get here until Monday, and we are freezing. Can you please come look at the boiler?" I was there in 30 minutes. I spent 5 hours in their damp basement, replacing a blown valve and rewiring a busted thermostat. My hands were cut, my back was screaming, but I got the heat running. I walked upstairs, wiping grease off my hands with a rag, expecting a thank you, or maybe a cup of coffee. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and found Marcus and Elena engaged in a furious, hushed argument. "He cannot be here tonight, Marcus," Elena hissed, aggressively chopping vegetables on her marble island. "Are you insane? It's the firm's winter gala. Alexander Sterling is coming. The Alexander Sterling. If he sees your father walking around in dirty boots, smelling like a mechanic's pit, you can kiss that senior partner promotion goodbye." Marcus rubbed his temples, looking stressed. I know. I just needed him to fix the heat. I'll get him out of here before the caterers arrive." I stood in the hallway, completely frozen. I wasn't meant to hear it, but the truth doesn't care about your feelings when it decides to show up. I took a slow breath, smoothed out my flannel shirt, and stepped into the kitchen. "The boiler is fixed," I said quietly. Elena jumped, nearly dropping her knife. Marcus turned around, his face pale. "Dad," Marcus stammered. "Thank you. That's great. Listen about tonight." "I heard," I said. My voice was steady, but inside I was bleeding out. "You have an important party. You want me to leave?" Elena didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She crossed her arms. "Arthur, try to understand. This isn't a family barbecue. This is high-level corporate networking. Marcus is up for a promotion that pays 7 figures. The people coming tonight judge everything. The art, the wine, the company we keep. You don't exactly fit the aesthetic." The aesthetic. That's what I was to her. An ugly piece of furniture. Marcus walked over to a drawer, pulled out a checkbook, and quickly scribbled something down. He tore the check out and slid it across the marble island toward me. "Dad, I'm sorry," Marcus said, not looking me in the eye. "It's $5,000. Take it. Consider it payment for fixing the heater and a little extra. Just take the money, go out the back door, and stay in the detached garage until the party is over. There's a space heater out there. Just stay out of sight, please." I looked down at the piece of paper. $5,000. He wasn't paying me for the boiler. He was paying his own father a bribe to hide in the dark like a dirty secret. For a moment, a fierce, burning anger rose in my throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind him of the double shifts. I wanted to remind him of the Mustang I sold so he could sit in these fancy rooms. I wanted to tear the check into 100 pieces and throw it in his face. But I remembered what a wise man once told me. Silence terrifies a fool more than shouting. I reached out with my grease-stained fingers. I picked up the check. I folded it neatly in half, and I placed it in my breast pocket. "Okay," I said. Just that one word. "Okay." Marcus let out a massive sigh of relief, his posture relaxing completely. "Thank you, Dad. I knew you'd be rational about this. Just keep the garage door locked until midnight. I'll come get you when everyone leaves." I turned my back on my only son, walked out the heavy oak back door, and stepped into the freezing December evening. The detached garage sat about 50 yards from the main house. It was a massive, 3-car structure, but Marcus only used it to store landscaping equipment and used furniture and empty moving boxes. I unlocked the side door and stepped inside. The air was thick, smelling of cold concrete and damp cardboard. I found a small, rusted space heater in the corner. I plugged it in, and the coils slowly hummed to a dull, weak orange. I found a plastic folding chair leaning against a stack of boxes, set it up near the heater, and sat down. Through the small, frosted window of the garage door, I had a perfect view of the mansion. Around 7 o'clock, the luxury cars started rolling up the long, sweeping driveway. Valets in crisp black uniforms opened doors for men in tailored tuxedos and women in designer gowns. I watched the golden light spilling from the massive bay windows of my son's house. I could faintly hear the elegant hum of a string quartet playing in the background. I sat there in the dark, the cold gnawed at the arthritis in my knees, a persistent, dull ache that served as a physical reminder of the years I had spent crawling under diesel trucks to pay for Marcus's education. I took the folded check out of my pocket. $5,000. I traced the numbers with my thumb. This piece of paper was supposed to represent my value to him. It was a severance package for 30 years of fatherhood. I didn't cry. Crying requires a certain level of hope, the belief that tears might change something. I had no hope left. I just felt a profound, heavy emptiness. 2 hours passed, then 3. The party inside was clearly in full swing. At one point, I saw Elena through the window, laughing loudly, holding a champagne flute, touching the arm of an older, distinguished-looking man in a sharp gray overcoat. Marcus was hovering right behind her, nodding eagerly at whatever the older man was saying. I leaned my head back against the cold concrete wall and closed my eyes. I just wanted the clock to strike midnight so I could drive my old truck back to my empty house and pretend none of this had happened. But at 10:15 p.m., the quiet of the garage was interrupted. I heard the crunch of gravel outside. Footsteps were approaching the garage. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. I didn't move. I assumed it was one of the catering staff coming to fetch extra chairs or supplies. The handle of the side door turned. The heavy wooden door creaked open, letting in a blast of freezing winter wind. The silhouette of a tall, broad-shouldered man stood in the doorway. He reached out and fumbled along the wall until he found the light switch. The harsh, bright fluorescent tubes buzzed and flickered to life. I blinked against the sudden brightness. When my eyes adjusted, I saw the man standing there. It was the same older man Elena and Marcus had been trying to impress earlier. He was wearing an expensive, tailored charcoal overcoat over a pristine tuxedo. He had silver hair, sharp features, and the kind of posture that commanded authority without trying. He stepped into the garage, rubbing his hands together to ward off the cold. "God, I hate these parties," he muttered to himself, not realizing I was sitting in the corner behind a stack of boxes. Too much perfume, not enough oxygen. He took another step, pulled out a silver cigar case, and froze. He had finally noticed me. I sat perfectly still on my plastic folding chair, my flannel shirt zipped to the top, my grease-stained hands resting on my knees. I looked like a discarded prop. The man stared at me. He didn't look scared or angry. He just looked profoundly confused. He narrowed his eyes, squinting against the harsh garage lighting. He took one slow step forward, then another. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice deep and gravelly. "Are you part of the catering staff? Because if you are, you've claimed the best hiding spot on the property." "No," I replied, my voice raspy from the cold. "I'm not catering." The man took another step closer. He was only about 10 feet away from me now. He stopped entirely. The silver cigar case in his hand slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor. His eyes widened in absolute shock. The color drained from his face, replaced by a look of sheer, undeniable disbelief. "Arthur?" he whispered. The word barely made it out of his throat. "Arthur Vance?" I frowned, studying his face. Time changes a man, paints lines on his face, and turns his hair silver. But you never forget the eyes of someone you once saved. I stood up slowly, my bad knee popping loudly in the quiet room. "Hello, Alex," I said. "Alexander Sterling, the billionaire CEO of Marcus's architectural firm. The man my son had paid $5,000 to hide me from." Sterling didn't say another word. He closed the distance between us in 3 long strides and wrapped his arms around me in a crushing, desperate hug. He smelled like expensive cologne and winter air, but underneath it, he was still the same scared kid I had met 4 decades ago. When he pulled back, there were actual tears welling up in the corners of his eyes. "Arthur, my God, Arthur, I have had private investigators looking for you for the last 5 years. When a shop in Chicago closed down, you just vanished." "I retired, Alex," I said gently. "Moved down here to be closer to my son." "Your son?" Sterling asked, wiping his eyes and laughing a rich, booming laugh. "You're living down here? Arthur, why are you sitting in a freezing garage during a party? You should be inside." Before I could answer, the garage door swung open again. "Mr. Sterling?" Marcus's voice was high-pitched and frantic. He rushed into the garage, his expensive Italian shoes slipping slightly on the concrete. Elena was right behind him, her face a mask of absolute panic. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry," Marcus gasped, waving his hands frantically as he stepped between us. "It's so dirty out here. Please, let's go back inside. I was just about to open a vintage bottle of Bordeaux I've been saving for you." Marcus shot a look at me over his shoulder. The venom in his eyes was unmistakable. "I paid you to stay hidden," his eyes screamed. Elena stepped up, forcing a terrifyingly fake smile. "Yes, Mr. Sterling, please. This is just our handyman. He was supposed to fix the boiler and leave hours ago. I'll have the valet escort him off the property immediately." "Get out," Marcus hissed at me under his breath, barely moving his lips. Alexander Sterling stood perfectly still. The warmth that had been in his eyes moments ago vanished instantly, replaced by a cold, terrifying calculation. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Elena. And then he looked back at me. Sterling's brilliant mind connected the dots in a fraction of a second. "Handyman." Sterling's voice dropped an octave. It no longer sounded like a party guest. It sounded like an executioner. He slowly turned his entire body to face Marcus. "Marcus," Sterling said, the calmness in his voice making it infinitely more terrifying. "Is this man your father?" Marcus swallowed so hard I could hear it. He started to sweat, despite the freezing temperature in the garage. "I, Mr. Sterling, I." "Answer the question." Sterling barked, his voice echoing off the concrete walls like a gunshot. Elena physically flinched, stepping backward. "Yes," Marcus whispered. He looked like a small, terrified child. "Yes, he's my father." Sterling closed his eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath. When he opened them, he looked at my son with a level of disgust I had never seen a human being direct at another. 42 years ago, Sterling said, his voice deadly quiet. Before the firm, before the penthouses and the private jets, I was a 19-year-old kid sleeping in a rusted-out Chevy Impala. I had no parents. I hadn't eaten a hot meal in 3 days. I walked into an auto shop in South Chicago begging to sweep floors, and the owner laughed and told me to get out. Sterling pointed a shaking finger at me. This man, Arthur, was the lead mechanic. He followed me out into the alley. He didn't just give me the sandwich out of his own lunchbox. He took me to a thrift store, bought me a clean shirt, walked me back inside, and told the owner that if he didn't hire me, Arthur would quit on the spot. He put his own livelihood on the line for a homeless teenager. Marcus was shaking now. He looked back and forth between us, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Sterling snapped, stepping closer to Marcus. "Because you don't ask. You don't care. Arthur taught me the value of hard work. He taught me about loyalty. When I wanted to start my first small contracting business, Arthur took a loan against his own house to give me the seed money. Without Arthur Vance, there is no Sterling Empire. There is no firm for you to work for." Elena tried to salvage the sinking ship. "Mr. Sterling, please understand. Arthur isn't comfortable in high society settings. We thought he would prefer the quiet. We even gave him $5,000 as a gift. I didn't say a word. I simply reached into my flannel pocket, pulled out the folded check, and let it drop from my fingers. It fluttered down and landed on the dirty concrete floor between us. "He paid me," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion, "to hide in the dark so I wouldn't embarrass him in front of his wealthy in-laws." Sterling looked at the check on the floor. He let out a dark, humorless chuckle. "Marcus," Sterling said, adjusting the cuffs of his overcoat, "I came to this party tonight to decide if you possess the character required to become a senior partner. I need leaders who understand loyalty, men who stand by their foundations." Marcus dropped to his knees. He actually fell to his knees on the cold concrete, grabbing the edge of Sterling's coat. "Please, Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. The mortgage on this house, the cars. If I don't get this promotion, I lose everything." "You're not losing the promotion, Marcus," Sterling said coldly, Stepping back, so Marcus's hands fell away. You're losing your job. Effective immediately, you are terminated from the firm. My assistants will pack your office on Monday and mail your personal items to whatever apartment you have to move into after the bank takes this house. You can't do that, Elena shrieked, her composed facade completely shattering. We have contracts. We'll sue you. Sue me. Sterling smiled, showing his teeth. I have more lawyers on retainer than you have shoes, Elena. I promise you, I will drag it out until you are entirely bankrupt. Sterling turned his back on them. He walked over to me, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, and guided me toward the garage door. Come on, Arthur, he said softly. You're not spending another second in the dark. I'm buying you the best steak in the city. We have 40 years to catch up on. I didn't look back at my son. I didn't say goodbye to Elena. I walked out into the crisp winter night with the only man who had remembered my worth. Behind me, I could hear Elena screaming at Marcus, and Marcus sobbing on the concrete floor. His perfect, manicured life was dissolving into ash. It has been over a year since that night. Marcus lost the house in 6 months. Without his exorbitant salary, the debts consumed him. Elena filed for divorce the day the bank sent the foreclosure notice. She didn't love Marcus. She loved the life he financed. When the money stopped, her vows expired. He lives in a small, one-bedroom apartment on the industrial side of the city now. He works as a mid-level project manager for a small firm, making a fraction of what he used to. He calls me every Sunday. Sometimes he cries. Sometimes he just apologizes over and over, asking if we can meet for coffee. I answer the phone. I listen to him, but I haven't agreed to meet him yet. Some wounds don't heal with a simple apology. Sometimes, a man has to sit in the ruins of a life he destroyed to truly understand the value of the foundation he tore down. I live comfortably now. Alexander Sterling insisted on paying me back the loan I gave him 40 years ago, with 4 decades of compound interest. I didn't want to accept it, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. I still live in my small, 3-bedroom house. I still wear flannel shirts, but my mind is at peace. If you're listening to my story, I want to leave you with this truth. Do not measure your success by the square footage of your home or the brand of the car in your driveway. Measure it by the respect you show to the people who held your hand when you couldn't walk. Never be ashamed of the calloused hands that fed you. Never hide the parents who broke their backs so you could stand tall, because the universe has a way of testing our character. Karma is a patient, quiet observer. It watches how you treat those who could do nothing for you. And when the bill finally comes due, no amount of money in your bank account can buy back the soul you sold to get there.